Welcome to Tough Conversations with David Wood, where play meets depth. We help teams and high-performing leaders like you to master your tough conversations so you succeed in your career and in your life. When we avoid tough conversations, we stay small. Teams stay disengaged, conflicted, and ultimately end up quitting. When we lean in and master our tough conversations, they become the defining moments that literally shape our careers, our relationships, and our lives. So let's dive in and master your next tough conversation so you can be the leader that you would follow. Let's play. How this came up for me is I've recently been training in your assessment, and I was really impressed. I was like, because I work with another company and they have an assessment, whatever, but it didn't have the structure. Once you've identified what you want to work on, you've got a really great structure. And I thought, I want people to know what's possible. I wanted them to know about leadership plans. I want them to know about 360 feedback so that they can develop. So that's what generated this. And I asked you and you said, yes, I'm happy to talk about it. Welcome everybody to my second interview with Jason Gore of Newberg, Gore and Associates. Jason's a brilliant man, he's an executive coach, and he's going to tell us some really great stuff today about how and why you'd want to develop your leadership skills, particularly if you're an executive or entrepreneur, but even if you're not. We'll also cover how to change. Awareness can be enough, just becoming aware that there's something to change, but it can be slow. Jason's going to tell us how to accelerate it, particularly using his stop, start, and continue model. All right, let's dive into it. Welcome, everybody, to the Tough Conversations with David Wood podcast. We've got Jason Gore back again. I'm going to fill some time while he finishes eating. And we had a great interview earlier on the show about people just aren't talking to each other. So I recommend you go and find that episode. And now we're going to talk about how to truly develop leaders. Jason Gore is an executive coach at Newberg, Gore and Associates, specializing in leadership at high-growth startups. For over 20 years, Jason has led leadership programs in over 85 cities across 15 countries for the Fortune 500, the military, NASA, and even Burning Man. Welcome, Jason Gore.
Thank you, David.
Good timing. Who should be listening to this episode? What kinds of people? I'm assuming executives, but you know, what's our audience?
My expertise is in business leaders, anybody that has people underneath them, or any project leader where you're trying to inspire and motivate a group of people towards executing a specific goal.
Yeah.
But I think that anybody can learn from that because we're all leaders in our life. We're leading different aspects of community. We're leading in our families. We're designing a birthday party. We're figuring out how to sing a song with other people. That anytime we're trying to collaborate or do anything, leadership skills apply.
Great. So we're probably focused on executives, managers, but we can include entrepreneurs and anybody who wants to be a better leader, to be cause in the matter and create things in time and space. So why do you believe, if you do, that leadership's important, and why would people be interested in developing their leadership skills?
Well, I mean, it's essential if you want to work with others to create a vision. Leadership skills are essential, right? And whether you're the leader or the follower, you are all taking on different aspects of the project. And without good leadership and collaboration skills, we could do a lot of things in isolation. But that means that it's a pretty small vision, right? Anything you could do in isolation that doesn't require others, like it could be a contribution, but almost all the big contributions in the world come from a group of people working together to accomplish something, right?
Wow, that seems so simple and clear. And the way it occurs to me is you want to develop your leadership skills because you can do more.
We can have more impact in the world for sure.
Yeah.
Have more impact in your life. If you want to, anytime you want to do anything with a group of people, even going to lunch together. Like I love during the workshops watching how a group of people organize around how to go to lunch. And sometimes I'll actually videotape it. And then when we get back from lunch, we'll watch the catastrophe of that decision making and how the decision got made.
Right.
It's really quite simple. It applies to every aspect of our lives.
Right. So you could do a lot without leadership skills as within corporations, they call it an individual contributor who just does their own thing. Here's my stuff. But
Right.
if you want to do more, it involves other people, and you're going to need skills to influence and enroll and guide those people to create more.
And, in today's day and age, there really aren't many individual contributors. We relegate those tasks to machines these days, right? Now, it does happen, but even let's say you're a barista, right? You're still coordinating with other people to have everything run smoothly, even though maybe 60% of your work might be individual. What happens when we're out of coffee beans and someone has to run back? Do I do that? Do I ask another person to do that? That it's very rare in this world to be a true individual contributor. Almost all of our work is collaborative.
Wow. So now I'm seeing, like, I was thinking leadership is just like you're a manager, you got a team of people who report to you, so you're a leader. But now I'm seeing you could just be part of a team, and leadership opportunities still are going to arise all the time, like with the coffee beans.
Yeah, I see very little difference between the words leadership and collaboration. The only real difference is like who has the final say in decisions, and is there a person who's doing more delegation? But even if I'm an employee and my boss is delegating to me, I'm also asking him to do stuff, right? And I'm delegating stuff to him to support me. Hey, I need to get the strategy document so that I can complete my task analysis by Friday, right?
Yeah.
That now my boss is my customer because he has to deliver something to me so I can deliver something back to him. So it's always a two-way street, David.
Okay, great. So we're changing it up from the whole idea that it's just people who report to you. You can lead people above you, which people call managing up, and you can lead people on the same level as you, which you might call collaboration with peers.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm starting to see that the word lead could also be replaced with perhaps responsibility, agency, and cause. Does that resonate for you?
Well, if we look at someone's morning routine and how they, navigate getting out of bed, getting coffee, and they're not living in a family context, that might be a bit of a stretch, but that does require agency.
Well, this brings me to the next question I was going to ask you before we get into the details of how people increase their skills is, what about leading yourself?
Yeah.
Is that a skill that's needed? And that would apply to getting out of bed and deciding what you're going to do for the day. Like I might wake up and play online chess for 6 hours, or get myself to go and work on a podcast interview, right? I came to this instead. So what do you think about self-leadership?
Well, let me tell a quick story. I feel like one of the best lessons I ever learned about leadership came from an 8-year-old. So I'm visiting a CEO friend of mine and at his house, and walk in the door, and his son Tommy is playing on his turned off computer and has a little plastic cell phone that he's talking on. He's talking and he's typing, and I said, "Hey Tommy, what are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm playing CEO." "Oh, what do CEOs do?" And he says, "They type on the computer, they write emails, and they talk on the phone." And I looked at his dad, and his dad is like, "That's about right." Right? That when you look at what leadership is, the vast majority of leadership, and the higher you go in an organization, the more this is true, is you're no longer producing anything directly. All you're doing is communicating, right? You're making decisions, you're delegating, you're assessing, you're offering feedback, you're course correcting, right? But it's all through words. And so when I think about leadership, I really think about communication. And so, yes, we could play it up to be like communicating with yourself, and that agency is part of leadership, and some of the same skills and same discipline are necessary. But I really see leadership as largely focused on in the interpersonal communication realm.
Got it. Yeah. And, for people who find leadership to be a vague word, I know you've got an assessment at Saturn leadership and Newberg Gore.
Yeah.
What are some of the categories that you assess before we get the 360 feedback? Like, what are we talking about when we talk about leadership? Can you talk about some of the pillars that you use?
Sure. I actually really want to focus on behaviors first and what we call micro practices.
Okay. Yeah.
And then roll those up. So, you ask what leadership is, and, a lot of people will just start talking about it. At the end of the day, they'll start talking about people. Like, that's a good leader because of this and this and this. But they come to a place, or many people will come to a place where they say, hey, I know a good leader when I see it. You could feel it, right? And the question is, well, what is leadership? And that was a question that I studied and analyzed for a lot of years. And I feel like I didn't get many good answers, right? And there was, models that talked about charisma and, inclusivity and all these other things about leadership. There's models that talk about more personality types. But like, what is leadership? I never really got to the bottom of it. And I ultimately came to the place of, well, the most useful explanation of leaders started to arise for me when I learned what do good leaders do? What are the behaviors that they do? Like, when they make decisions, they consult the experts. And when they make decisions that are contrary to those experts, they loop back and explain why they made the decision. Like, that level of specificity all of a sudden became the most useful information on leadership. And so I produced a list of about 75 items that were perceived as good leadership. And I showed that list to a friend and a leader, and he said, oh my God, this is so helpful. And he just went through, I don't do this, I don't do this, and I don't do this. And like the next week, he called me up and he's like, that was really useful. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And he's like, I've just never seen such a concise list of what good leaders do. And, you ask what good leadership is. And basically what I now say is, if you do these 46 items, you will be perceived as a good leader, the vast majority of times. And if you don't do these 46 items, actually more to the point, you will not be perceived as good of a leader as you could be. And
isn't 46 a lot of things for people to work on in their business life?
It is, which is why, one, we rolled it up into 7 categories, just so that people can grok it a little bit easier. And, it tends to help people organize around how to do shifts. But, I mean, heck, if we could get down leadership to 46 things that they have to do, actually, I think that's pretty good.
Right. Well, I said it a bit tongue-in-cheek. I was setting you up because I know that you've got a way to help drill down into the ones that are going to make the biggest difference for them, which we'll get to with the feedback and all that. But you just gave one.
Can I just answer that? Let me just answer that now. Even the best of leaders can always level up. And what I look for is, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 items that clients can do differently that'll have the greatest leverage in their ability to lead a team.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're looking for what those items are and just work on the highest leverage items first, get those to be more functional, and then we'll reassess. And if you try to work on everything at once, it tends to...
Yeah. What are some of the other micro practices? You mentioned one where you go back and you loop people in on the decision. What are some other examples?
Well, at the high level, let's just go back to that earlier question. We end up with 7 core buckets, right? And they're really kind of larger skill sets or moods. But if you look at how a leader works, right? A leader, what we want when you look at leadership is, we want to produce something in the world. We want to make a commitment or have a vision and make that vision happen, right? So the first bucket is, what's the vision, right? And what's the roadmap? How are we going to get there? What's the general timeline? Where are we doing this? Who are we doing this with? Like, what are we producing together? And getting everybody clear on that is a real, I would say it's one of the hardest skills that if I look at great leaders, that driving that vision down so that everybody understands that they're part of that vision is very challenging, and the challenge increases as the organization grows. Right, it's a lot easier with a 5-person team than a 5,000-person team, right? To get everybody to be connected to that vision from the chair that they sit in. Second big one is listens with openness and curiosity. Now, honestly, this is the hardest skill to build if someone doesn't already have it. To really fundamentally empathize with another human being, understand where they're coming from, especially when you're in conflict, right? How do you listen with openness when you have a completely different opinion and you're emotional and connected to that opinion? It's really hard to listen to the other side.
Yeah.
Politics really brings this out very loudly, for example. But another one is speaking with transparency and authenticity, especially, in a conflict situation or giving negative feedback or sharing something that might not be popular. You're kind of putting your neck out there to do that and to be open so that people know where you stand on issues, especially if you are a minority an opinion, to let people know when you're not satisfied with their work and you're giving negative feedback, especially to a peer, right, where you have no authority, or to a superior and boss where they could fire you and you might not have explicit permission to do that.
Okay, so that's helpful. Thank you. We got some examples of what it actually means to be a leader, and we won't give away the whole farm. But let's suppose
it's all online anyway. Just to say, it's on the Newberg Gore website. If you look at tools and you look at SLI, it's all listed there.
Great. All right, so we'll give people something they can research. But now, how as a leader, I've got these 46 micro practices, these 7 buckets that expand into 46 micro practices. How do I work out which ones I'm good at, I'm not good at, and which ones I'm going to focus on so that I get better?
There's a couple ways to do it, right? So first of all, most people don't have the luxury of getting a 360, or even having the luxury of leading a team where you could get a real solid assessment. And in those cases, a self-assessment goes a long way. People are reasonably good at identifying blind spots for themselves. When they look at this list, a lot of people can say, I need to develop this and this and this.
Oh.
Now, I think that what's ironic is there are times where someone thinks they need to develop something, but they're already actually pretty good at it. And so, because they're working on it, it was a problem in the past, and they're working on it, they've actually gotten quite good at it, and they don't realize they've gotten good at it. And that's kind of when you need some feedback from other people, or there's some real blind spots where they really don't know what they're good at. So
you got some positive blind spots.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
For sure. And some of the areas that we tend to be kind of type A around, that we think are weaknesses, really are strengths. The question is, do you want to really push on that strength and leverage that strength and organize your career around that strength, or do you want to level up some of your weaknesses?
Yeah.
It depends on what you're up to.
So what I'm hearing from this is, firstly, you can self-assess on these practices, rate yourself. Secondly, group assess. You can get feedback from the people that you work with, because they'll see some things that you don't see, and they'll have different viewpoints. And even if you're in your world, your view of it is, I'm great at all these things. If you are great at all these things, and I'm doing air quotes, if you can't see the video right now. If 7 people on your team think you're not, then that's important information.
Yeah.
Right. Even if you are good at that, if they think you're not, you've got at least a PR issue.
Well, I think there's also an in between, David, which is, ask someone, hey, want to hear how is it to work with me? Could you just tell me what's working and what can be improved? Right. After any meeting, you could end every meeting with a plus delta, right? Plus, hey, what worked here? Delta, what can we do to shift?
Yeah.
You go on a date with your partner. Hey, how was this date? What's the plus delta on this date? How could we improve? Well,
right. Yeah.
I brought this thing up, and then the waiter came over and interrupted, and then you didn't pick up the conversation again, and I felt like you didn't care about what I just said, and it was really important to me. Like, oh, got it.
Right. So you can solicit feedback in all aspects of your life. So you can self-assess, you can get feedback, and your assessment does both of these things. It does the self-assessment and it does the group assessment. But you've also added something else that I hadn't heard of before. Would you speak about the voting and what that brings to it?
So one is we have these 46 behaviors that are assessed, but we also have people vote at the end on what are your greatest improvement opportunities from their perspective.
Okay, so you've got self-assessment, group assessment, voting. We think these are the things that are most important. You've got comments, which sometimes are transparent, and your hope is that people will actually have conversations out of this.
Yeah. It's a very thorough assessment. In some ways, this assessment tool really helps you kind of identify and level up your leadership so that you are not the bottleneck of your organization, and you could level yourself up so that the resources of your team are being directed to the most powerful way, in the most powerful ways and the most efficient ways that those resources can be directed to achieve your vision.
Well, let's say you've identified 3 or 4 areas. You've done the assessment. People have the votes are in.
Yeah.
You've been voted off the island. And you've got to work on, let's say, being more collaborative, sharing the vision, and speaking more transparently. You've got your 3 things. How does that translate into action? Just knowing I've got to get better at that doesn't make me better at that. So what's next?
Yes. Well, first of all, awareness is a huge first step, right? When you really acknowledge and that you have a blind spot and you commit to doing something differently, right? That can be huge. Now, it might take time, but if that commitment is solid, my belief is that change will happen. We could accelerate that change, right? But once you make that commitment to changing something and you start being aware and you start noticing the consequences, when the consequences get severe enough and you are passionate about making something different, so it could be either like, I want something positive in my life, or I'm devastated by something negative, about something about my leadership. When you get to those places, I think that change starts to happen. And you could accelerate that through a number of things. One is you could accelerate it by articulating what you will stop doing and what you will start doing, and maybe what you'll continue doing, right? I call it a stop, start, continue. So what we want to do is we want to disrupt the current pattern, right? And make new choices to create a new pattern. Hey, I commit to getting out of bed rather than just laying in bed and watching YouTube videos from 8 to 9. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to get up and go take a shower, right? And that's going to be, and so you intentionally design in your head what you're going to do differently.
Right. And I like something you said in one of your videos. It was a really interesting framework for learning. You said initially you'll catch it too late.
Yes.
That's the first thing. Well, maybe first you realize you have this issue, but then you go and do the same thing with somebody and you realize after the meeting, oh, I did that thing again. Right. You catch it too late. You dust yourself off. Maybe you go and have a conversation with the person, clean it up, maybe change it, maybe you don't. But next time you might catch it 10 seconds too late, or you might catch it, and ultimately you work up until you catch it while you're doing it. But that could even be, we could call that perhaps advanced.
Well, I think ultimately with enough commitment, you're going to get there. What most people do is quite the opposite of that, David. What most people do is they make a commitment, right? Hey, when someone says something I disagree with, okay, so let's say that a leader, he wants, like a typical leader complaint is, I'm surrounded by a bunch of yes people. Like, I don't actually get people to push back on me. Yes, I'm a bit of a bulldozer, but I need people around me that when I have a stupid idea, they tell me, right? And a lot of visionaries, might complain about that, especially startup visionaries, because sometimes their team members might not be willing to push back. So they say, okay, well, when someone comes up with an idea that I think is absolutely awful, instead of just berating them and belittling them in front of everybody else, I'm going to start listening.
Huh.
Right? This is common.
I think I did. I'm laughing because I think I did it this week. I said to my assistant, that was terrible. Like, that was really terrible. And we laughed a bit about it, but I realized I think I did what you're talking about.
Right. But then, it's like we do that and then we say, well, why aren't people willing to push back on my ideas? Well, every time they do, you beat them up. So what do you expect? So let's say that you commit when you hear a bad idea and you're a little bit triggered by it, and might even be pissed off about it. Like, how could such an intelligent person have such a bad idea? Like, and you commit to actually listening to where that idea is coming from. What is the goal of the idea? What's the one little gold nugget? Even if the idea itself is crap, like, there's probably some little gold nugget in there of like, what is this person trying to solve for?
Right.
So let's say I commit to that. And, what most people will do is, then Johnny comes up with a bad idea and I start berating him again. And then, he leaves. I'm like, oh, damn it. I did that thing again. Damn it, Jason, like, stop doing that. And I'll get angry at myself. What's interesting is psychologically, that actually reinforces the old pattern. It digs the groove deeper. What we want to do instead of that is we want to notice it. Oh, I did that thing again. And recommit. In my mind, okay, next time that happens, I'm going to pause. I'm going to apologize. Say, hey, I notice I'm not listening and I'm beating you up. Sorry for doing that. I'm going to change gears. And by just verbalizing it, if you can, it's very helpful. Change gears and ask a question. And that's going to be my commitment.
I think this is great information on how to actually change behavior. So listeners, once you've identified the areas you want to work on, you can create a development plan, which would include a start, stop, continue for each item. And then you'll get better at it. You'll start with catching it later, and then you'll recommit, and then you'll get to the point where you're catching it while it's happening and can change it. Jason, tell us just the layers of version, perhaps, because I know you got to go soon. Anything about support structures to make sure that this behavior change actually occurs?
Okay, so once you identify what you want to change and you have kind of a basic plan of attack, either a stop, start, continue, or some next steps or some experiments you want to try, having a running partner, someone that is supporting you, that is holding you accountable in a friendly way. Now, maybe that's a coach, but that could also be a friend, right? You could also design something where you literally have a running partner. Like, if you look at all the studies on what makes someone successful at a diet or going to a gym, right? The number one thing by far is to have a diet partner or a workout partner, right? Because if you meet somewhere, like if you say, hey, we're going to meet at 8 o'clock on top of the hill, rain or shine, right? And you're in bed at 7:45 and you're like, it's raining out. I'm tired. I drank last night. I don't really feel like getting up. But you know that your running partner is waiting for you at the top of the mountain. And, if you don't show up, they're going to be disappointed. Like, the odds of you getting out of bed, getting your shoes on, and getting out the door, right, greatly, many, many X's increases, right? So same thing in leadership, like having a coach that's holding you accountable, having a friend. Like, when I look at the effectiveness of coaching, I would say that the vast majority of the effectiveness of coaching is basically you're a high-priced babysitter, right? You're just holding someone accountable to their commitments, helping them look at when they didn't meet those commitments, having them either recommit or giving up on the commitment. Say, no, you know something? I'm really not committed to this. Getting really clear about the commitments and going out and trying experiments again and just helping them with motivation and keeping them accountable, right? The vast majority of physical trainers aren't necessarily moving with you on form. They're just motivating you to show up to the gym and work hard.
Right.
You know?
All right, leaders, You got some great information, some golden nuggets here on how to identify the areas you want to develop, how to create a leadership plan so that you can develop them, how to actually change that behavior in real time, and then some accountability structures so that you stick to the course. Jason Gore, how can people find out more about you and the Saturn Leadership Index and how you can help them?
Well, NewbergGore.com is our coaching firm specifically for executives. We really specialize in CEOs. SaturnLeadership.com, which is going to be available in January of 2020. We'll have all of our tool sets online. A lot of what we're doing and what we're up to, we're giving away.
Well, Jason, thanks for being on the Tough Conversations podcast.
David, this has been great.
You've been listening to Tough Conversations with David Wood. Now it's action time. Mastering your tough conversations will have a major impact on your team, your company, and you as a high-performing executive or entrepreneur. If you're ready, request a discovery session with me at playforreal.life so we can transform your team, your company, and you. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I would love you to help me spread this message of tough conversations in a very simple way. Just leave a public review at playforreal.life/podcast. And you may hear me read it out loud and thank you live on a future podcast. Now, let's play.